The interesting facts about this week's Sikha is the fact that obviously the peak idea, the peak thread of the Sikha is of course the Mitele Rebbe, and it's interesting to note that La'anius Daiti, from what I count, this is the Sikha in Tafshin between Nun Aleph and Nun Beis. This is the Sikha with the most OCAs, 20 OCAs, and the Mitele Rebbe, that's the whole Teichen of the Sikha, was all about saying Chasidus B'Shufi. It's interesting to note how on that Sikha where the Rebbe talks about saying Chasidus in an abundance and at length, that's the same Sikha which is actually the longest ones, I think the longest one, or at least the most ACAs, which is 20 ACAs. We're going to jump straight into it. This week is Tes Kislev. Tes Kislev is the Yom Histalkus, as well as the Yom Histalkus of the Mitele Rebbe, as well as it's Yud Kislev following that, which is the Chag Geula of the Mitele Rebbe. It's the year the day that the Mitele Rebbe came out of captivity, and the story is not for now, but that's the point. We want to understand two things. Number one, we want to understand what's the connection between the Mitele Rebbe's Yom Histalkus and Yom Histalkus together. What's the connection between that and Parshas vayetze, as well as Parshas Vayishlach, which we read by Menachem? Point number two, which the Rebbe wants to understand, is what's the connection between Parshas vayetze and the Mitele Rebbe's Chag Geula and Yom Histalkus and Yom Histalkus and so on and so forth. In short, the Mitele Rebbe, what's the connection to the Mitele Rebbe and what we've been speaking about recently, that we already finished Kol Inyanim, and now the only thing which is left is just to be Mekabel Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu. So says the Rebbe, we want to understand the connection between the Mitele Rebbe and the Avodah of Kabbalas Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu. I was giving a shir on this the other day, and one of the people there, I asked him if he understood what I was saying and if he could repeat it back to me, and he said, yes, and the Rebbe wants to know what's the connection between the Mitele Rebbe and Mashiach. So I told him, no, you missed the point. The Rebbe is not asking over here what's the connection between the Mitele Rebbe and Mashiach. The Rebbe is asking over here what's the connection between the Mitele Rebbe and our current unique avodah, which never existed before in history, which is the avodah of being mekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu. The Rebbe wants to understand the Rebbe wants us to understand. So the Rebbe is asking as a question, what's the connection between the Mitele Rebbe and our current unique avodah of being mekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu? To understand this, we first have to understand what is so unique, or to introduce the fact that it is unique, that the Mitele Rebbe was nistalik, or Bechlal Tzaddik as nistalik, on the same day that he was born. It says about Moshe Rabbeinu actually, Hayim Nimlu Yom Yushnoisai. Today, says Moshe Rabbeinu about himself, my years have officially been completed, testifying the fact that today is my birthday and he's going to be nistalik the same day that he was born. On that, the Medrash says the famous Medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yeshev, the Eibishter sits, umemalish noisein shel tzadikim. The Eibishter fills up the days of tzadikim. What does it mean, fills up the days of tzadikim? What it means is that the Eibishter makes sure to calculate their life in such a way that they're going to end up being nistalik, they end up passing away on the same day that they were actually born on. Now, that itself we have to understand, why is the Eibishter making it his own personal business? Yeshev, the Eibishter Yeshev, and he's calculating the tzaddikim. Why is the Eibishter finding it so important? And the answer is the following. Everyone understands that the point of a tzaddik is not just the ruchnius part of his life. For that, the Eibishter could have just taken the neshama of the tzaddik, and the Eibishter could have implanted him in Atzilus or in Gan Eden. What's the reason why the Eibishter brought a tzaddik down here to this world? Because the Eibishter wants that the tzaddik should take his holiness, his ruchnius, and he should bring it down into Elam Hazeh Gashmi. It should be his elokus should be expressed in Elam Hazeh Gashmi. So says the Rebbe, what is so unique about the Mitele Rebbe? Or in other words, what is so unique about a tzaddik that passes away the same day that he's born? That we see that his ruchnius, meaning his completion, nobody doubted the fact that he's complete. He's shalom beruchnius. But here we see that his ruchnis de shleimus even expressed itself in his physical life. meaning in the fact that he passed away on the same day that he was born. Now, all of this being said, the Rebbe adds a parentheses, which is, by the way, you would think, based on all the above, that the mila of a tzaddik passing away on the same day that he's born is the fact that now the gashmius of his life is expressing the shleimus of the ruchnius of his life. So you would think that a tzaddik which didn't pass away on the same day that he's born, which is many of our tzaddikim, many of our rabbeim, we would think that, okay, maybe chas v'shalom it could be a chisorin. The Alter Rebbe was not nistalik the same day that he was born. The Tzemach Tzedek was not nistalik the same day that he was born. So maybe it's a chisaron in them, chas v'shalom. So the Rebbe clarified, the Rebbe dedicates for this a whole ois, as well as in the ha'aris. Not sure if Bachar Mir learned the ha'aris or not, but it's very geshmaki ha'aris. The chlal ha'aris are usually where the juice of every sikha is. The point is that in the ha'aris, the Rebbe offers two alternatives of how really every tzaddik is complete, meaning every tzaddik which is complete is also complete in this way, where his spiritual life is expressed in his physical life, and really in the Indian he passed away, or on the same day that he was born. How does that work? The Rebbe offers two explanations. One is, really, let's say the tzaddik was born on Chav Cheshvan. Yeah, Lamer Zogan. Really, Chav Cheshvan, he was supposed to pass away. But during that year that he was supposed to pass away, he did his avodah so b'shleimus. In other words, he did such a good job that the Eibusher didn't feel the need of keeping him in the world anymore. There was no need for it. He completed his job early. Be'inyan, his due date of passing away, of being nostalgic from the world, was Chav Cheshvan, which is his Yom Histalkus. But he did such a good job throughout the last year, B'chaim Chayusei Be'almadein, in this physical world, such a good job, there was no need to keep him longer. So the Eibusher took him a little bit early. But not because he didn't get to this shleimus of passing away the same day he was born. Fakert. Really, Be'inyan, he was passing away the same day he was born. Interesting. I looked up the Medrash. I saw the Rebbe is mitzayin to Shmei Snaba. I was very intrigued. What is the Rebbe being mitzayin to? So I looked it up. And over there, it's a very interesting Medrash. I'll say Bekitzer. A king hires a bunch of workers, and he sees that most of the workers are getting their job done in a certain amount of time. There was one guy, he was Pashat, a quick guy. The king liked him. And the king saw that Pashat finished his job, one of those stress, within an hour or two, he finished his job. So the king decided, you know what, he finished his job. I like him. I'll go on a walk with him. And so he calls over this guy and he goes on a walk with him in the gardens. Comes the end of the day, the king calls everybody and he gives everybody their paycheck. All the workers their paycheck. Comes this last worker and the king gives him a paycheck just like everybody else. So all the other workers started complaining. Hayitachin, what's going on over here? We worked the entire day, we got this amount of money. He worked for a couple of hours, he gets the same amount. So the king told him, it's very pashut. What took you a full day to accomplish, he accomplished within 2 or 3 hours. So everyone's getting the same pay for what they accomplished. So it's interesting. In other words, this is a real mucker. It's not a vart that the Rebbe is coming up with, which is in the first glance, when you learn the Sikha, it sounds like it's a vart that the Rebbe is coming up with, which, of course, if the Rebbe comes up with it, it's Kodesh Kodashim. But it's interesting to note that it's also already a Medrash, which the Medrash says this regarding a certain tzaddik, which passed away very young, I believe 23 years old. And I guess the world was very puzzled. The tzaddik passed away so young. The answer is, the Medrash is explaining, because he did his job that what he had to do. He's such a tzaddik, he finished it within 23 years, but it takes other people 70 or 80 years to accomplish. But anyhow, the nekuda is that that's alternative number one. How could we say that the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Dos, they didn't finish, they didn't pass, were not nistalik the day they were born? What's a chisar? No, they finished their job early, but the Indian, their due date was Chav Cheshvan, Lomer Zogan, for example. A second alternative that the Rebbe offers is that really a tzaddik was supposed to be nistalik Chav Cheshvan. Elamai, the Eibusher saw you doing such a good job. The Eibusher enjoyed the fact that this tzaddik is hanging around the world. He's helping the Rebbe happen in a better way. So the Eibusher decides, you know what? I'll keep him in the world a little bit longer. I'll keep him a couple of extra days, weeks, months, or whatever it may be. And so, the tzaddik be'inyan passed away Chav Cheshvan, which is Yom Histalkus. But the Eibusher decided to give him a couple of extra days, weeks, or months in the year. And that's how it happens that he was installed not on the same day mamish. But be'inyan, his due date, mitzad, where this tzaddik is holding, was again a shleimus due date, which is when he was nostalgic on the same day he was supposed to be nostalgic on the day that he was born. Just to make mention that the Rebbe obviously references to our Moshe Rabbeinu, which is born either on Zayden or Chodesh Adar, and he was nostalgic on that same day. And the Avos as well, there's a malchus if the Avos were born on Tishrei or Nisan, but whichever opinion you hold, you also hold that they're nostalgic in the same month. Now, the Rebbe from this learns that there's 3 levels, there could be 3 levels of this shleimus that we're talking about. A tzaddik which is nostalgic on the same day, a tzaddik which is nostalgic on the same week that he was born in, or a tzaddik which is nostalgic the same month that he was born in. 3 different levels, not for now to be ma'ayin what that means, but the nekuda is, in short, that again, we find that this idea exists by all tzaddikim. It's an important nekuda to clarify. Anyhow, but the Rebbe, after saying this, goes back to the original point, which is, but still, when we see it be'ofen golui by the Mitele Rebbe, it sticks out, and it's a big deal, and it's important, and it's good to know that the Mitele Rebbe was not just a shalom beruchnius, but also a shalom begashmius, or in other words, his shlemus beruchnius expressed itself in the shlemus begashmius. Now, all this being said, when a person learns a sicha, at this point, the sicha goes into the next topic, which is Parshas Vayetze. At first glance, when a person learns a sicha, it could be a little bit hard to connect the dots of what's the connection between everything that we said to the following part of the sicha. So keep your attention span big and strong, because we are going to go through this next part of the sicha, and then we're going to show how it's really hainu hach. It's really one nekuda, and this is where the fire of the sicha is about to begin. The Rebbe analyzes the story of Parshas Vayetze, at least the first part of the parsha, starting off with the fact: why is it that the Torah decides to discuss a tremendous part of Yaakov's life, the way he exists in Charan? In other words, there's 2 Yaakov Avinus. There's Yaakov Avinu the way he is in Eretz Yisrael. There's Yaakov Avinu the way he is in Charan. Yaakov Avinu the way he is in Charan is Yaakov the way he's a shliach. He's going on at shluchos. And the question is, why does the Torah decide to put such a big focus on Yaakov Avinu the way he is in Charan versus Yaakov Avinu the way he is in Eretz Yisrael? To answer this question, says the Rebbe, we have to go to the story. And the story goes like this: Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Charan. Yaakov goes out from Beersheva and he goes to Charan. Who's Yaakov? Every single neshama. He goes out of Beersheva. What's Beersheva? The 7 meters of Atzilus. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, so on and so forth. So every neshama journeys out of the 7 meters of Atzilus. Vayelech Charana. And the neshama needs to journey to Elam Hazeh Agashmi, to this physical world where the Eibishter is concealed. In other words, Charan, Milachon Charan Afshel Elam, a place that gets the Eibishter upset, because people, it's shaykh to do things which are chas shalom against the Eibishter. And then the neshama comes down to Elam Hazeh Agashmi. Now, the neshama comes down to Elam Hazeh Agashmi. What gives the neshama the strength? You want to say it in Grabbe Werter. What gives the neshama the mental capacity to be able to, on the one hand, remember Holocaust and live Holocaust, and at the same time be engaged in Elam Hazeh and talk to Elam Hazeh? What's going to give Yaakov Avinu the strength to stay honest, sincere, and of course, most importantly, devoted to Hashem, while he's dealing with Lavan, scammers, people which make them work for 7 years to give him the wrong person, and then make them work another 7 years to give him another person? I mean, you're talking about the real low lifestyle people. And Yaakov Avinu is meant to deal with them and engage with them and discuss things with them, and at the same time stay completely hecher and remember the Zachel Elokah. What's going to give him that strength? For that, we have to go to the next part of the story. On the way down to Charan, suddenly, a mountain comes into place. Famously, it's Har Moriah. It's the mountain where the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built. He sees that the sun is setting. And of course, Chazal tell us that it was in the middle of the day. The sun was not supposed to set, right? And suddenly the sun sets. He understands that this is a sign from Hashem. If the sun is setting over here, that means I'm supposed to go to sleep. He sets up shop. He gets comfortable. He lies down on the ground, takes a bunch of stones, puts it around his head and his body, like some sort of like U. It was not covering him like a cover with a lid. It was just covering him like the letter U around his head and the rest of his body, like this. And he goes to sleep. Kitzer, he has a whole vision where he sees a sulamutz of artza v'reisha magia shamayma. He sees the ladder connected to in the ground, going up to the sky. Malach Elokim elim v'yardim bay. And then he wakes up and he says, "Wow, manira amakim, this place is so great, it's so awesome." And I didn't know it was so holy, implying that if I would have known, I wouldn't have went to sleep or whatever it is. What's the story? The Rebbe attacks this story in many different angles. And the Sikha, it's spread apart a little bit. I'm going to ask all the questions in one shot, and then I'm going to answer them as one flow. 14 years, Chazal tell us, Yaakov did not lie down to go to sleep. Of course, he slept. Physically, it's impossible to not sleep more than 3 days. But he did not lie down to go to sleep for 3 days. For 14 years. The first time in 14 years that he decides he's going to lie down to go to sleep is in the holiest place in the world, in the Menachem Hamikdash. Says the Rebbe, why? He couldn't find a better place to go to sleep? What, the first best location to go to sleep lying down was in the holiest place in the world, Menachem Hamikdash? Second of all, asks the Rebbe. And like I said, the Rebbe asks many questions from different angles. I'm going to say it as a flow. What's this idea that Yaakov Avinu is putting stones around his head? What's this for putting stones around his head? So Chazal tell us it's in order to protect him from animals. Animals, yeah, if a bear comes or a tiger comes and he sees a person lying down with a few stones around him, those few stones are going to stop the tiger or the bear. Who is this stopping exactly? Even a snake is not going to stop. Like I said, it's not like these stones were covering him, over him. It was just around him. Who is it stopping exactly? And we'll suffice with these two questions and we'll jump straight into it because time is short. Says that what happened was like this. What's the reason why Yaakov for 14 years didn't lie down? By Yaakov it was clear that the head represents Ruchnius and the foot represents Gashmius. By Yaakov it was also clear that if you put Gashmius and Ruchnius on a scale, obviously which one is closer to Hashem? What do you guys think? What's closer? Gashmius or Ruchnius? Ruchnius. At first glance, that's definitely what it seems like. And Yaakov Avinu himself thought this way. So for 14 years, he didn't want to put his head on the same level as his foot. He didn't want to downgrade a Ruchnius being as his head to be on the same level as the Gashmius being as his foot. But something drastic happened, which changed the whole picture. And this is really, right now, the punchline of the whole Sikha. When Yaakov was in the Menachem Hamikdash, when Yaakov was in that holiest place, which level of the Eibishter was revealed to him? The answer is not Memale and not Sovev, meaning not the Eibishter the way he comes down to Elam Hazeh Agashmi, not the Eibishter the way he reveals himself in a spiritual, Ruchnisdike level, but rather the Eibishter himself. Atzmus U'Mahus. Now, what's unique about Atzmus U'Mahus what's unique about the Eibishter's essence, is that from the perspective of Atzmus U'Mahus, the same type of tzimtzum, it's a deep vart, probably from the deepest varts of Chassidus, but the Rebbe kochs in it so much. I'm going to say it now in brief, and Alavai, we should have more time in the future to have a proper shir on it, and even better, that we should be able to say it, we're going to be zeichet to say it with our own eyes when Mashiach comes. And then the Nekudah is like this, but I'll say it now in short. We all understand that for the Eibishter to go out of Atzmos U'Mahus to create Olam Hazeh Agashmi, it's a tremendous tzimtzum. For the Eibishter to come and create this physical world, it's a tremendous downgrade. But what we don't understand, or at least what we many times take for granted, is that the Olam Ruchnim, the spiritual worlds, Gan Eden, Bria, Atzilus, in our mind, it seems like that's easier for the Eibishter to create. So for the Eibishter to go down to the level of Atzilus, that's easy. It's close to Hashem. Why? Because it's Elokus. But to come down to this physical world where Hashem is not revealed, that's a big deal. Comes the answer, that's not true. Not true at all. Exactly the opposite. Mitzad, the perspective of the Eibishter, creating anything which has a tzir, creating anything which has some sort of definition and image and beginning and end and form, it's a tremendous Yerida Me'er Panav Yisbarach. It's a tremendous downgrade that is incomparable. It's like going from 0 to 1. Going from pshitos, from no existence of any details, to the world of tzir, to the world of arkava, to the world of where the Eibishter, where there's things which have definitions, which have a beginning and an end. For the Eibishter, the same, if you want to say the very grubby words, the same effort that it takes him to come down to the Mazeh Agashmi is the same effort that it takes him to come down into the Elam Ruchnim. The same Yerida that it is for the Eibush to come to the Mazeh Agashmi is the same Yerida and the same type of Kayach and Simtsum and so on that the Eibush needs to go through in order to go into Ak, into Atzilus, into Akudim, into Brud, and whatever it is. Because the Eibishter the Eibishter doesn't have any details to him. The Eibishter is not composed out of any details. So for the Eibishter to go into any world, to go in this context means to create any world that has details, which every world has detail, that's what makes it a world, the fact that it has a certain definition, otherwise it wouldn't be a world. The fact that it has some sort of definition itself, that is a tremendous Yerida for the Eibishter. So in other words, from Hashem's perspective, is Gashmius lower than Ruchnius? The answer is no. Is Ruchnius higher than Gashmius? The answer is also no. So from Hashem's perspective, when Hashem looks at Gashmi and Ruchni, he's seeing two creations that he's creating every second. Equally as low. The difference between Gashmius and Ruchnius is not from the Eibusher's perspective. The difference between Gashmius and Ruchnius is from our perspective. We feel higher, meaning closer to Hashem, when we have Ruchnius in our life. And we feel lower, meaning more distance from Hashem, if we're more focused on the Gashmis of our life. But let's say that for a moment, I have the Eibusher's pair of glasses, and I look at the world the way Atzmos U'Maos sees the world. Suddenly I recognize that the Olam Hazeh Agashmi and the Olam Ruchnim are both equal in Hashem's eyes. Which means on a practical level, that when it comes to me being engaged with a physical thing in this world, it's not me downgrading myself. Of course, as long as I'm doing it as a kavanah of doing what the Eibishter wants. But once again, as long as I'm doing it the way the Eibishter wants, me getting engaged with physical things is not a downgrade. All of this being said, when Yaakov Avinu came to Menachem Hamikdash, suddenly, from looking at it from the human perspective, of course, as a tzaddik, but still, as a human perspective, quote unquote, milamata l'maylo, he always saw it that Gashmius and Ruchnius Gashmius is lower than Ruchnius. Gashmius is more distant and Ruchnius is more close to Hashem. When Yaakov came to the Menachem Hamikdash, suddenly he recognized the perspective of Atzmos U'Maos on the world, that Gashmius and Ruchnius are both creations from Hashem and they're equal in Hashem's eyes. In truth, if you want to go into the crux of the issue, if you want to go into the really Oivi Akeda over here, it's pung fakert. Why did Hashem create the worlds? Why did Hashem create Atzilus? Why did Hashem create Ak? The answer ultimately is to create the Olam Hazeh Agashmi. And why does he want the Olam Hazeh Agashmi? And the answer is to be revealed specifically in Gashmius. So if you think about it from the perspective of the kavanah, not from how it feels, from the perspective of the kavanah of why Hashem is creating the world, Olam Hazeh Agashmi is much greater than Atzilus. Olam Hazeh Agashmi is much greater than Ak. The whole reason why Ak exists is that the lower level from it should exist. The whole reason why Atzilus exists is he should have Bria. And the whole reason why you have Bria is just to be able to have Yetzirah. And the whole reason why you have Yetzirah is just to have a Siyah. And why do you have a Siyah? To have a Siyah. No, but why do you have a Siyah? To have a Siyah. What's the next world? This is the world. The entire Zayden Histalkus was created just for Olam Hazeh Agashmi. And you want to tell me that Ak is bigger than me? You want to tell me that experiencing Ak is greater than experiencing the Eibishter and Olam Hazeh Agashmi if the whole reason why Ak was created was just to be able to create Olam Hazeh? So really, not just from the perspective of the Eibishter, Olam Hazeh, Gashmius and Ruchnius is equal. If you really go into the Eibishter's intention of why he's creating things, me being engaged in the physical world, and yet revealing the Eibishter in the physical world, rather than just being spiritual and sitting in the whole day just Torah, but actually being involved in being Bavaro Olam Hazeh, that is a much greater level, mitzad kavanah. It's a much greater level of the Eibishter, which I'm tapping into. When Yaakov heard this, he right away lied down. He said, I want my head and my foot. I want my Gashmis and my Ruchnius to be equal. Meaning, I want that the same level of Kedusha that exists in my foot should exist in my head. And the same level of Kedusha that exists in my head should exist in my foot. Meaning, which level of Eibishter? Meaning, which level of Eibishter does he want that should be revealed to him? Not Elokus. Not the Eibishter the way he reveals himself. Because if we're talking about the Eibishter the way he reveals himself, well, the head is much greater than the foot. Because the head feels a lot more than what the foot feels. So obviously he was not looking for a revelation of Hashem. He was looking to experience Atzmus Umahus. He was looking to experience Hashem the way he just exists before creating anything. And therefore, now that Yaakov is experiencing Atzmus Umahus, by default, his head and his foot are completely equal. So why for the first time in 14 years is Yaakov lying down? Because for 14 years, he always saw that Ruchnius was greater than Gashmius, and therefore his head couldn't be the same level as his foot. Finally, over here, where Atzmus Umahus is revealed, is he able to recognize that my Gashmius and my Ruchnius are actually one, because Atzmus Umahus sees them as one. In fact, there's actually a Maila, there's actually an advantage in the Gashmius over the Ruchnius. To show how extreme this point is, Yaakov took stones. He put it around his head, signifying what? That even the doimim, not a plant, not an animal, and not a person, or I should say not a person, not even an animal, not even a plant, rather a stone, a doimim, which has no brain and doesn't even grow. Even a stone, which is the pure epitome of just a glump of Gashmius, with no qualities to it, no milas to it, even a stone, in Hashem's eyes, is a place where Atzmus Umahus could be revealed. Equally to how Hashem could be revealed in Atzilus. Of course, as long as we use the stone to fulfill the kavanah that Hashem wants from us. So when Yaakov put the stones around his head, the stones got into an argument. The Medrash tells us which stones got into who was the argument between? It was between the stones which were under the head. They were arguing with the stones which were under the body. The stones under the head were saying, Chavre, Zayden and Elokos, Habibi, we have a Gilui of Atzav, a Gilui of Elokos over here. We feel Hashem in our brain. We're around the Tzaddik's head. Comes the stone which were under the body, and the stone which were under the body said, Chavre, you're missing the point. Was sagst du a Chainik? What do you think the whole goal over here is? To be feeling spiritual, to feel all good, to feel Elokos, to feel Atzilus. Farker, the goal is that the Eibishter should penetrate the Lamazeh Agashmi. Us, the stone which are under the body, we're the ones which really have the Eibishter himself, Atzmus Umahus, the way he's coming down to the Lamazeh Agashmi. What was Hashem's Achra? Hello, you get the argument? What was Hashem's Achra for the argument? What was Hashem's verdict in the argument? Who was right? The stones which are under the foot or the stones which are under the body? Hello, anybody know? How do you see? One more time, yeah? There was an argument between the stones, which were under the head, and the stones which were under the body. Each one claimed his claim. The stones under the head said, look, we have a Gilui of Elokos. The stones which are under the body said, what do you mean? We are Gashmius. Gashmius is the epitome of everything. If we reveal the Eibush and Lamazeh Gashmi, we're fulfilling the whole purpose of Dira B'Tachtonim. So there was an argument between the stones under the head and the stones which are under the body. Who was right? What was the story? What was the next part of the story? They became one. The next part of the story is that they became one. What does it mean they became one? The Eibusher is saying, Chavre, for me, Gashmius and Ruchnius, the stones under the head, under the body, it's all the same thing. When Yaakov woke up, Yaakov's first reaction was, wow, you know which level of the Eibush I just experienced? Ve'anoichi, a level of Atzmus Umahus, that lo yadati, which is impossible to ever reach with knowledge. So once again, Yaakov gets up and he says, Ve'anoichi, I just experienced a level of Anoichi, of the Eibushter, lo yadati, which is much higher than Yediyah, higher than Das. Now, like I said, after going through the story of the parasha, one last detail, which is the most important one. All of this was a achana of going down to Charan. What's going to give Yaakov the strength to be able to go to a place of scammers and so on and so forth? What's going to give Yaakov the strength to be able to go down to a place of Hel and Behester and be strong in his discussions to the Eibishter and be pumped up about doing his shluchos, even though he's by himself in a place full of shkatzim u'namasim? The answer is Because right before going on Shluchos, he stopped by Menachem Hamikdash, meaning right before going on Shluchos, he stopped and he experienced the Eibishter himself, meaning he experienced this awareness that Gashmius and Ruchnius, it's all one. If I'm going down to Charan, the Eibishter being revealed in Charan is in a sense even greater than the Eibishter being revealed in Atzilus. Because going down to Elam Hazeh Gashmi, to people which are in the dark of the dark, and revealing to them that the Eibishter exists, that's in a certain sense even greater than experiencing the Gilui Elokus in Atzilus. So that parking in the Beis Hamikdash was in a sinas koyach to be able to keep that strong hiskashrus throughout the entire time, because now he understands Choran is not a contradiction to Elokus. On the contrary, it is its own unique way of expressing Elokus, and it's even greater. Now the Rebbe, like I said before, we're going to wrap this up and we're going to connect it to the beginning of the Sikha. And then we're going to go with the Ma'aseh Poel, and that's going to be the end. Says the Rebbe, this was the whole life of the Mitele Rebbe. The life of the Mitele Rebbe is to give every single one of us that experience that Yaakov Avinu went through. How? How does the Mitele Rebbe give us the tools to be able to experience that experience that Yaakov Avinu had, that awareness that Gashmis and Ruchnis are one, and in fact the Gashmis is the Kavanah, and the whole Tachis the Kavanah is to bring the Ruchnis into the Gashmios? How? Through Chassidus. The Mitele Rebbe is famous for saying Chassidus for hours. And it's not just about the time that he spent saying Chassidus, it's about the type of Ma'amarim that he said. What by most Rabbeim we would call a Hemshech, meaning a bunch of Ma'amarim that compose one long series, by the Mitele Rebbe, that was one long mimer that he said for 9 hours or 11 hours straight. And as Chassidim were capable enough to actually follow for that entire time. The Tzemach Tzedek refers to the Mitele Rebbe that if you would cut his finger, Chas v'shalom of course, not blood would come out, rather Chassidus would come out. The Mitele Rebbe expressed himself that I wish that Jungelite, when they meet in the marketplace, they should be talking about Yichud Eilah and Yichud Tata. The Mitele Rebbe also said that when am I going to be satisfied? When a chassid is going to know the level of ak, the way he knows his 5 fingers, his physical 5 fingers. In other words, by the Mitele Rebbe wanted, his goal was that through giving us such an abundance of chassidus, which by the way, small commercial break, I don't know if any of you guys ever learned the Mitele Rebbe as a mimer. But if you ever do it, which Beis Hashem, of course you will, it's like sitting in front of a mashpia and hearing a mashpia take a nekuda and digest it and talk about it and explain it and give an example and re-explain the example and then go back to the original nekuda and explain the nekuda again. You're part sitting in an experience of a Rebbe going down to a level under level under level, Pashat opening up levels of Elokus in such a bright, lichtik way. It's such an experience. If you never learned the Mitele Rebbe as a mimer, of course, the Ma'aseh Poel we'll see in a moment is to learn the Mitele Rebbe as a Torah, especially throughout this Shabbos and Sunday, Tes Kislev. But it's an experience which is masik midvash, sweeter than honey. Anyhow, back to the flow, back to the nekuda, and we're almost done. And then the Ma'aseh Poel, and then we're going to be done the whole sikha, meaning then we could start living it, right? Is that the Mitele Rebbe's goal was to give us that experience of Yaakov Avinu. And that is through giving us that abundance of chassidus and expressing himself in that way that when a chassid goes in the street, what should he be thinking about and what should he be living with? The answer is Yichud Eilah, Yichud Tata. Says the Rebbe, now, after so many generations went by, and bechlal from history, but especially now that we're holding, that we already finished doing everything that we have to do, all that's missing is, meaning now we already reached a point where the physical world is a complete kli for the Elokus to come through it, which we need a whole share to explain what that means. I'm not going to go through that now, but the point is that now that we're already in the stage where the physical world is a kli for the Ruchnius to already reveal itself through it, all that's missing is the following. All that's missing is, says the Rebbe, that a Yid should open up his eyes. And that a Yid should open up his eyes properly. And when a Yid opens up his eyes properly, what's he going to see? He's going to see that he's sitting in the table together with the Eibishter and with Mashiach Tzidkenu. And the Rebbe adds in parentheses, which as we know, in every generation there's one human being which is a potential Mashiach. And we're sitting around the table with that potential Mashiach. was Mashiach Tzidkenu. So says the Rebbe, when a Yid opens up his eyes and he realizes that we're pashat in a time period where the Eivishter is so revealed that this physical world is already such a klifa lakus, a Yid is going to go crazy. Now, to conclude, says the Rebbe, how do we open up our eyes? And this is the last nikud of the Sikha. The way we open up our eyes is by pashat learning Chassidus and Inyana Yolo Mashiach Beshufi. To pashat learn an abundance of Chassidus and to pashat learn an abundance of Inyana Yolo Mashiach, says the Rebbe. And that's going to give us the tools to be able to pashat see how this physical world is already, not just it's ready to, Yaakov was looking at the world, that this physical world is ready to reveal the Lukus. The Rebbe is telling us if a Yid opens up his eyes, he's going to see that this physical world is already revealing Elokus. And the Ma'aseh Poel is the Mitele Rebbe is a Torah, including for women, says the Rebbe. Women should also learn Chassidus, especially in this generation. Women should learn Chassidus. And to give Chanukah geld on Chanukah, which the Rebbe says, because the Rebbe would give Chanukah geld, so that means whoever gives Chanukah geld on Chanukah, he's increasing in his iskashrus to the Rebbe. Through giving Chanukah geld, a person increases in his iskashus to the Rebbeim because he's doing what the Rebbeim did. So what's the Ma'aseh Poel the Sikha? Or as it is in the question sheet, what's the lesson of the Sikha? The answer is to open up our eyes, to be Mekabel Mashiach, to realize that we're sitting in the table, meaning we're sitting in the world, where Melech HaMashiach already exists, as we had in the Sikha previous weeks, and the Rebbe refers to it again here. There's already that person. The Rebbe quotes that Midrash again. That every generation has the one person which is already a person, a Mashiach. And when we open up our eyes, we start looking at the world differently. We're really in a Gilul Dike world. We're in a Mashiach Dike world, and it's real. We should be zeichet to learn a lot of Chassidus, to see Beinei Basar, see the Rebbe Beinei Basar, techaf miyad mamish.